We rely on open source tools every single day. I mean, they're the invisible bedrock of the entire internet. But what happens when that bedrock is a lot more fragile than any of us think?
So let me start with a question that sounds, well, it sounds impossible. What if becoming more successful than you've ever been could actually bankrupt your business?
Well, this is the story of that exact paradox playing out in the real world. In January 2026, a simple user request on GitHub for Tailwind CSS, one of the most popular tools in web development, triggered this shocking reply from its creator, a reply that revealed a deep financial crisis and major layoffs.
And this whole situation, it really pulls back the curtain on what we're calling the open source paradox, a story of soaring, unbelievable popularity and somehow crashing revenue.
I mean, by every single metric you could look at, Tailwind CSS was a massive runaway success. It was, and it still is, growing faster and is bigger than it has ever been. For millions of developers, it's the default choice. But this is where the story takes a really weird turn. Adam Wathan, the creator, revealed that traffic to their documentation site, a totally crucial part of their business, was down 40% since early 2023.
And if you think that's bad, the financial hit was even worse. I mean, way worse. Despite record numbers of people using the free tool, the company's revenue was down a staggering 80%. So you've got to be asking, how is that even possible, right? More users, but less money. Well, this is the absolute heart of the paradox facing modern open source projects right now in the age of AI. So let's really dig into how this happened.
And believe it or not, this whole thing kicked off with something so simple. Just a single feature request that ended up being the spark that ignited this whole firestorm.
Yeah, this definitely didn't just happen overnight. This was a slow burn. It all started way back in October 2024. A user named Kevin Gage asked for a single documentation file to make it easier for large language models, LLMs, to use. For more than a year, the community just chimed in, saying, +1, good idea. And then, bam, January 7th, 2026, maintainer Adam Wathan drops that explosive reply, revealing everything. So what was this request? What's an LMS.txt file anyway? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like a robots.txt file, but for AI. It's a proposed standard that helps LLMs like ChatGPT easily read and understand a website's content. So basically, the community was asking for a way to help AI use Tailwind better.
Okay, so a file to help AI understand your docs, that sounds like a good thing, right? So why on earth would it trigger such a massive crisis? Well, the maintainer's own words say it all. AI has gutted our business so badly. Yeah, I mean, his reply was just raw and completely brutally honest. He wrote, "I'm having a shitty week. Again, I just had to lay off most of our team. I'm struggling with a ton of resentment right now over the popularity of Tailwind and the reality that I still had to end 3 people's jobs this week." You can just feel the weight of that. It really brings home the human cost of this whole problem. And he didn't stop there. He went on to highlight this impossible position he was in, saying, "It's hard not to be bitter about people asking for more and more free stuff when revenue is going down and you have to let people go." I mean, wow, you can just feel the frustration practically jumping off the screen. Okay, to really get why this happened, you have to understand how their business was supposed to work. It was a pretty classic funnel, actually. Step 1, a developer uses the free framework. Step 2, they run into a problem, so they visit the official documentation for help. Step 3, while they're on the doc site, they discover paid products like cool UI kits and templates. And step 4, a tiny percentage of those users buy something, and that money funds the development of the free tool for everyone. Simple, right? And this is the exact point where AI just breaks the whole system. See, instead of visiting the docs, developers now just ask ChatGPT or Copilot for the answer. They get the code snippet they need instantly, but they never see the ads or the links for the paid products. The AI becomes this middleman, siphoning off all the traffic that the entire business model depends on to survive. So, as you can probably guess, this incredibly candid post just blew up. It sparked a massive debate, and it really left the community divided. You had empathy, you had criticism, and everybody was searching for a solution. And the reactions were all over the map.
On one hand, you had this huge wave of empathy and support. People were praising the transparency and sharing stories of how Tailwind helped their careers. But then, you also had a lot of criticism and skepticism. Some questioned the business model itself, pointing to things like lifetime licenses. Others brought up tough competition. And of course, in the middle of all this, people started throwing out ideas for how to actually fix the problem.
And this whole situation really puts a spotlight on how different projects are trying to deal with this. Take Daisy UI, for example. They were mentioned a lot in the discussion. They actually give away a free LMS-type TXT file. But their business model is different. They fund their work through a paid MCP server that's specifically for AI tools. Tailwind, though, was completely dependent on that documentation traffic to sell its UI kits, a model that, as we saw, turned out to be super vulnerable to AI.
All right, let's zoom out for a second because this is so much bigger than just one company. What happened to Tailwind is like a warning shot, a flare sent up for the entire open source ecosystem. It forces us to ask this really uncomfortable question. What happens when AI starts to eat its own lunch?
You know, a user on Reddit named C4Roots absolutely nailed the existential threat here. They wrote, "The whole open source economy was built on give away the code, sell the expertise. Now, when some AI can just digest your entire documentation and spit out answers, what's left to sell?" That hits hard.
So, where do we go from here? What's the path forward? Well, the community is debating a bunch of different ideas. Could we see new licenses? Something like open for humans, but closed for AI? Or what about time-based access, where maybe sponsors get new versions first? Or maybe, just maybe, AI companies have to start paying directly for the high-quality data they're training on.
And that really brings us to the central irony in all of this, doesn't it? These amazing AIs were trained on the community's collective knowledge, on documentation that real people spent years creating. And now that very same community is left wondering how it's supposed to even sustain itself in a world shaped by the tools it helped create. Look, at the end of the day, the tools we all rely on are built by real people. And in this new AI-driven world, we're left with a fundamental question. How do we make sure those people can still get paid for their work? It's a question we all really need to start thinking about.